In what is considered part of the final testimony in the Alec Murdaugh murder trial, the state has called in its reply witnesses to tie up their case.
After this, a trip to Moselle for the jurors, and then it's closing arguments time. Greg Adeline live and outside the Colleton County Courthouse. Greg, these witnesses offered some compelling testimony today. And also, do you have a timeline on when the jury will be able to visit the scene of the murders?
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Billie Jean and Dondi. The jurors will visit Moselle after these rebuttal witnesses wrap up, the final one on the stand this afternoon. Right now, court is in a brief recess, and that testimony will continue in just a bit. But all in all, it was 6 rebuttal witnesses that the state put forward to answer some of the questions that were created by the defense over the past week. And some of this testimony very effective. Some of the more effective rebuttals coming from Ronnie Crosby and Mark Ball, former law partners of Murdaugh, who each testified and clarified that Alec Murdaugh told them that he checked the bodies of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh before he called 911, something that Murdaugh and his defense team sought to discount from the stand last week. Now, other effective rebuttal came from Dr. Reimer. You'll remember her. She conducted the autopsies of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. She testified today that Paul's head wound was not a contact shot, despite what other defense witnesses said. Harpootlian impressed her for a solid hour. She would not change that assertion. Another key rebuttal came from former Hampton Sheriff T.C. Smalls, who testified that Alec never asked to install blue lights, even though Alec claimed that he asked permission to do so last week when he testified. He also said that Alec never contacted him about the boat crash or any threats that the family received. No police reports, no requests to investigate. The defense also sought to exclude one rebuttal witness. That's Paul McGonigal. He's a cell phone expert from Charleston County who testified that he tossed a cell phone like a frisbee in his office end over end this past weekend. He testified that even when that phone is thrown, the screen will not always turn on. Now, you'll remember prosecutors claimed that Murdaugh threw Maggie's phone the night of the murders and it did not turn on. The defense ripped that witness, saying that it was an unscientific test, asking that he be disqualified. But Newman allowed him to continue and for that testimony to stand. But let's get back to Mark Ball, a key moment when he testified that Alec Murdaugh never expressed distrust of SLED to him, despite Murdaugh claiming last week in testimony that's what led him to lie to investigators. Take a listen.
And first question I'd ask you is, prior to the murders of Maggie and Paul, did you ever hear Alec express any distrust of SLED?
No, sir.
Can you tell the jury what your observations were of his relationship with the law enforcement community?
I thought it was very good. I mean, he interacted with them regularly, as most civil lawyers do, and then with his side gig as, solicitor, he obviously had interaction with them as well.
Do you remember?
Stood there for a moment, bleeding down his injured.
And just moments ago, some high drama in the court as the state's attorney general, the top law enforcement officer in the state, Alan Wilson, questioned crime scene expert Ken Kenzie, who said, and this was pretty dramatic testimony, Kenzie testifying that a 6'4" shooter could have shot Paul Murdaugh. He also testified that Paul's fatal shot was not a contact shot to the back of the head. And through what was a pretty dramatic demonstration, he showed that the angles suggested by the defense that Paul was shot from behind are simply not viable and that they don't make much sense. He confirmed that the shells next to Maggie came from a Murdaugh family weapon. And he also said that the two-shooter theory that was offered by the defense yesterday is really by no means reliable, and it certainly isn't absolute. You can remember that was a big headline from yesterday. Kenzie, in many ways, kind of shooting that down in his rebuttal testimony. But let's get back to kind of the lay of the land. As soon as Kenzie finishes testifying, those jurors will take that trip to Moselle. Whether that is late this afternoon tonight remains to be seen. Likely it will be tomorrow morning. The jurors will be able to go there and kind of check out the lay of the land, especially at the kennels, the scene of the crimes, where the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh took place on June the 7th, 2021. They can't ask any questions. There will be no presentations out there. And then, of course, closing arguments will begin shortly after that. So this is the last of the testimony in what is turning out to be one of the longest criminal trials in South Carolina history. That testimony wrapping up behind us here at the Colleton County Courthouse. But for now, that's the latest. We're live in Walterboro. Greg Adeline, WIS News 10.